Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Research Week, the start of Research Week 2023. My name is Dennis Tierney, and I'm the Research Communications Officer for the University of Limerick, and I'm delighted to welcome you here today. It's the first in-person Research Week we've had in a number of years, so it's fantastic that we're all here today, both on stage and also in the audience, but also over the next 5 days. And we've got a fantastic series of events that have been put on by all of the different research centres, research institutes and different faculties across the university over the next 5 days. And everybody's got a brochure in front of you. You can also log on to ul.ie/Research Week to check out all of the different events that are on, and obviously to register, because it is free to register, so we're not going to charge you anything. All it'll take is some of your time, but it'll be time well spent. So before we start, we are streaming this live on over Zoom, but we're also recording it for future purposes, that people can actually look back on this and listen to it and hear what the esteemed panel will be saying over the next 50 minutes or so. So if I'd ask everybody to turn their phones either to airplane mode, or better still turn it off, because where else would you want to be? Only here. You don't want to know anything else about the outside world for the next while. So if you could do that, that would be great. I have done mine already. I did it just before I came in. So without further ado, I suppose I'd like to introduce our chairperson for the day for the panel discussion, and that's the VP of Research, Professor Norelee Kennedy. She'll introduce you to the panel, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon for the event here and also for the next 5 days. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dennis. And listen, welcome to everybody. It is wonderful, as Dennis has said, to be here for Research Week. And it's just lovely to see all the work that has gone into today. You can see it very visibly outside in various banners. And it's just fabulous. And it is lovely to have the opportunity for one dedicated week to give emphasis, I suppose, and focus to the excellent research that the University of Limerick does. And I'd like to keep repeating that throughout the week, because I know absolutely from the role that I have, from the data that I see, from the people that I speak to within UL and outside, just exactly how brilliant our research is, how fabulous our people are, and the impact our research is having far and wide. And that's not just words that are said to say them and to sound empty about it. They're absolutely evidenced. And this afternoon's session is deliberately set up as the launch of Research Week to allow an opportunity for us to really talk in depth and casually and informally to some of our excellent researchers. So I'm delighted to have this opportunity to chair this session here today. We'll have an opportunity for some questions from the audience as we go through, and the panel have been advised it's quite informal and friendly. There's nothing here that's meant to be beyond showing how do excellent researchers do what they do. And I know from getting to know them very well in the last number of months and years just how busy they are as people alongside all that they do. So it is a great opportunity for us to have them here with us today. So as the title of the session suggests, this is about the President's Research Excellence and Impact Awards. And these awards, sorry, I have to put the glasses on. I did even print this in larger font than the team gave me, but unfortunately it's not going to work without the glasses. So the President's Research Excellence and Impact Awards, they recognise staff at the University of Limerick who make outstanding contributions to excellence and impacts of research. And that is impact that we see beyond academia. And today we're delighted to celebrate our 2022 award winners. And I'm delighted to introduce Dr Elaine Kinsella from the Department of Psychology and the Health Research Institute, Dr Hugh Geaney from the Department of Chemical Sciences and the Bernal Institute, and Professor James Gleeson and Professor Norma Bargary, who are both from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics, and MACSI, which is the Mathematics Applications Consortium for Science and Industry. Now, I will speak more about them in a little while and give a lot of information about them. And just to tell you at the outset, you're going to hear a lot from me in the next 15 minutes as I speak in detail about this wonderful group of people. And then I'm going to ask them some questions, so you'll hear less of me then. We are unfortunately today not joined by Dr Shumia Mukherjee, who's also from the Department of Chemical Sciences, and he was also a recipient of the 2022 Early Career Researcher Starter category. But you will find Shumia's podcast available on our website, along with a host of other excellent podcasts. So if you haven't recently looked at the updated podcasts available, I would encourage you to. And also there are interviews with all of our awardees here today. So just to speak a little bit to how the awards come about. So the university has a research committee, and underneath that research committee we have an research impact committee, which is chaired by Professor Helena Lenihan, who's joining us here today. And Helena has been doing this for a number of years and has been, I suppose, a real champion for research impact, along with colleagues in the research office, Christine Brennan in particular. So Helena, who's from the Department of Economics, chairs that wonderful committee, and that's a subcommittee of the impact committee that every year consider the applications. And I'm advised that particularly this year, as every year, but particularly this year, and Helena can attest to this, it was particularly difficult. I mean, the standard was so high, and I think on foot of that, you actually ended up awarding 2 awards in the starter category. So Helena is joined on that committee by Professor Brian Fitzgerald, who is the Director of LERO and in the Department of Computer Science and Information Systems, Professor Catherine Woods from the Department of PE and Sports Science, Professor Paul Conway from the School of Education, Dr Jenny Roach from the Irish World Academy, Professor Nigel Healy, who's the Vice President for Global and Community Engagement, and also by Professor Donald Truxillo from the Department of Work and Employment Studies. There is an external reviewer on the panel, and that's Dr Kate Morris, the head of Campus Engage with the Irish University Association. And then the awards are supported very ably by Yvonne Kiley, who is also in the Office of the Vice President of Research. So thank you, Yvonne, who's been heavily involved also in organising Research Week. So that's a little bit about how the awards come about. And now I'm going to speak a little bit about the awardees. So our first category we're going to talk about today is the Early Career Researcher Award. And this award celebrates individuals who are in the early stages of their research career, and that's defined as those who've held a post or hold a post that includes responsibility for developing their own research agenda. And there are 2 categories for the award. There's the starter, which is applicants who have between 2 and 7 years of experience since completing their own PhD. And then consolidator is applicants who are between 7 to 12 years experience since completing their PhD. So now to speak a little bit about our 2 awardees in the Early Career Researcher category. I'm going to start with you, Hugh. So Hugh, as I said earlier, is in the Department of Chemical Sciences, and Hugh was awarded the consolidator category of the award. And Hugh completed his degree in industrial chemistry in 2008 and a PhD in chemistry in 2012, both awarded from the University of Limerick. He subsequently moved to UCC as a postdoctoral researcher on an EU FP7 project, Stable, and worked on lithium batteries there. And following that, he was a senior postdoc researcher in UCC, investigating porous materials for lithium-ion battery applications. He then got sense and returned back to us in 2016 as a postdoc researcher on Enterprise Ireland commercialisation project. And in 2019, he was awarded an SFI Surge grant, which is a starting investigator research grant, and became a principal investigator in his own right. And he's been awarded the Bernal Mid-Career Researcher of the Year award in 2019. And since 2020, Hugh is now a senior lecturer in chemistry in the Department of Chemical Sciences. He has published a very impressive 85 articles in high-impact journals to date, and his research focuses on materials for energy storage spanning lithium-ion, sodium-ion, lithium metal, I'm remembering my periodic table as I look at these, and an alternative battery chemistry development. I just want to say that when I first met Hugh, it was during COVID, and I had to speak to him online in advance of a site review he was having for SFI. And we hadn't met before this. And we talked obviously about the upcoming review and the focus of research. And he gave me a crash course on what I needed to say essentially about his work. But then he started to tell me about all the other things he was doing. Course director, and you had a young baby, and you had lots of other things happening in parallel. So I suppose it was just so impressive to have somebody who could speak so coherently and specifically about his research and then manage all these other pieces. And you were leading huge modules. So that was my first introduction to you. So it was a pleasure to meet with you that occasion, Hugh. Now, our second awardee is Dr Elaine Kinsella, who, as we said already, is in the Department of Psychology. And Elaine is a chartered organisational psychologist and a lecturer in, senior lecturer in psychology, just recently promoted, and also the Assistant Dean for Research in the Faculty of EHS. Elaine's work focuses on creating and sharing new insights about the social influences on health and empowerment, particularly in the context relating to work, organisations and the community. So drawing from her training as a chartered work and organisational psychologist, as well as expertise in social cognitive psychological theory, Elaine adopts original, high-quality and systematic approaches to underline the interface between social and personal factors that influence health and empowerment. Her research is generating new knowledge relevant to academic disciplines, including psychology and medicine. So, for instance, in the aftermath of acquired brain injury, which affects over 19,000 people in Ireland annually, Elaine's research evidenced the importance of social groups in facilitating effective self-regulation, which in turn predicted better post-injury adjustment. During COVID-19, Elaine was particularly active, I think it's fair to say, and we'll hear about that a little later. Her research demonstrated how solidarity with co-workers, leadership and the general public served to protect the psychological welfare, so your well-being, anxiety, burnout, somatic stress, of frontline workers in the UK and Ireland by increasing their sense of meaning. And this was the COVID-19 Heroes Project, and I might ask you a little more about that later, Elaine. Elaine is also passionate about championing others' career development and fulfilment, and particularly those working as early career academics and researchers. And many of you will know Elaine is one of the co-founders of the Emerge Network for Academic Staff at the University of Limerick, which she started in 2020, and only 2020. It feels like a lot longer, Elaine. It's been a wonderful, I suppose, example of the harnessing of that peer support and peer network across the university. So you and your colleagues are to be commended for that. And it really is, has become a very wonderful example at the university of that peer support. So well done, Elaine, on that. Now, our final category is for the Outstanding Research Collaboration Award. And there's some nice, I suppose, synergy between Elaine's COVID-19 and what I'm going to talk about next with MACSI. The award for the Outstanding Research Collaboration Award celebrates the achievements of research collaborations by recognising the excellent research that delivers impact and an outstanding contribution to the field from such collaborations. So what can only be happening by virtue of such a collaboration that comes together, as is evidenced by MACSI. And MACSI, I think, were worthy winners for their award for their work on mathematical and statistical modelling during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll come back to a little more specifics on that in a moment. So MACSI, for people who are not familiar with it, is the Mathematical and Statistical Modelling Research Group that's centred in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. It was founded in 2006 and has developed, it's fair to say, an international reputation for modelling real-world problems that arise in industry, science and society. And back in 2020, and when you know, the world changed on its head forever and more, and thankfully has come back into some other sense of normality since. But there was a group formed at that time called the Irish Epidemiological Modelling Advisory Group, and that was established in March 2020, and it was to provide expert advice and forecast models to Ireland's Chief Medical Officer, Tony Holan, and the National Public Health Emergency Team, NEFIT. These are all acronyms we've all become so familiar with, and that was helping to look at COVID-19 responses. So MACSI's director, Professor James Gleeson, was a member of IMAG, along with Cathal Walsh. And I know from speaking to Philip Nolan and having met him on a number of occasions, just how central your involvement was to that. And I'll speak a little more to that later. But it's fair to say that, you know, and I know, James, you're always at pains to point this out, it's not only you or Cathal, it's your wider MACSI team who helped in that collaborative response. So along with Cathal and James, it was also supported by the collaboration group for IMAG, which was Norma, along with Dr David O'Sullivan and Dr Joseph O'Brien, and then other colleagues in MACSI who were doing related work on SFI COVID-19 rapid response calls. And this includes James Sweeney, Kevin Burke and Fatima Jouima. And then also other related activity from Professor Stephen O'Brien, Dr Romina Gaburo and Dr Padraig McCarran. Now, I want to read out, as I mentioned earlier, podcasts, and as part of doing our awards, Helena undertook a podcast in which she interviewed, as part of that, Professor Philip Nolan, who is a household name to all of you, but now is the Director General of SFI. But at the time, he was leading NEFIT. So Helena interviewed him, but as part of that, I want to just read out a quote from Philip. It is quite lengthy, and those of you who know Philip will understand why, but it does give absolute voice to exactly how important the work that MACSI and James and colleagues did. So I quote from Philip: "The underpinning research led by MACSI researchers during this time developed within a matter of weeks the population-based, susceptible, exposed, infected, removed, or the SEIR model. This model had communicated the now famous time-varying reproduction number. However, a crucial technical challenge in applying these models was their accurate calibration to observed data. The models built by James Gleeson and his tight-knit team of collaborators, both inside and external to the University of Limerick, enabled us to calibrate to the daily number of confirmed new cases and to then use the history of the disease to predict future scenarios to protect our population. This work was central to our response, and we relied on this model more than adapted to include the effects of vaccination and infected-induced immunity more than any other through the full course of the pandemic. Furthermore, other models used by IMAG built upon the initial work from the MACSI team, and James and colleagues were exceptionally collaborative and supportive, giving unstintingly of their time to support the development of age-cohorted and agent-based models by other groups. MACSI researchers collaborated admirably with their colleagues in the island of Ireland and internationally to communicate data over the course of the pandemic. This work involved painstaking work and alignment between public health decisions at a government level, and the team are to be commended for their continued cooperation in our response efforts. So just flash back to all those daily briefings that you saw in COVID-19, and our colleagues here were central to that. So very, very worthy winners. Now, just before I finish, I'm going to speak a little bit about James and Norma. So this is your bios, folks. So Professor James Gleeson holds a BSc in Mathematical Science and an MSc in Mathematical Physics from University College Dublin. In 1999, he completed his PhD in Applied Mathematics at Caltech. He has lectured at Arizona State University and at University College Cork, and since 2007 has held a chair in Industrial and Applied Mathematics here at UL. James's research interests are in the mathematical modelling of stochastic dynamics, I've said that right, have I? With a particular focus on complex systems and networks. James is head of the Department of Maths and Stats at UL, is an associate editor of the Journal of Complex Networks, and has served as a member of the editorial board of Physical Review E and of the scientific advisory board of ISI Foundation Turin. He is a co-PI in Confirm and Insight Research Centres, has held 4 Principal Investigator Awards from Science Foundation Ireland, and was a co-PI on a Future and Emerging Technologies project funded by the European Commission's FP7. James is the director of the Science Foundation Ireland Centre for Research Training in Foundations of Data Science, and served as a member of the Irish Epidemiological Modelling Group, as we've just heard. Professor Norma Bargary is a Professor of Data Science and Statistical Learning in the Department of Maths and Stats also. She's a co-director of the MACSI Research Centre and UL Vice Director of the SFI CRT for Foundations of Data Science. Norma's research focuses on the development of statistical models for large, high-dimensional data that are measured over time. So that's data that's measured using sensors, for example, human movement. She's extensive experience working with collaborators in a range of research areas, including medicine, biology, sports science, psychology, and with industry partners. And Norma has played a leading role in numerous successful European and national grants, with a total of over 1.6 million awarded to her as PI. And she also has a keen interest in engaging with researchers, the media and the public on the appropriate use of statistics, and is the first of 2 Royal Statistical Society statistical ambassadors to be based in Ireland. That is Norma's tongue twister for me every time I read her bio out. And I'm getting better every time, Norma, I think you might agree. Norma is also our SALI professor, so the Senior Academic Leadership Initiative, one of our first 2 SALI professors appointed at the University of Limerick. So, I think you'd agree I've done a great job in reading about these wonderful people, but I think what you should know from their bios is just the range of things that they're involved with, which I think is just phenomenal. I've mentioned it about Hugh particularly because it was poignant that day I spoke to him, but I am aware from what all the rest of you do that you're very, very busy people. So I suppose I want to start with kind of a general opener sort of question. And it's about research culture, and there's a lot at the moment talking about research culture, and we've been recently as a university invited to collaborate with colleagues in UCD, for example, talking about research culture. And you'll know that research culture and emphasising our culture around research is one of the 4 strategic goals that we have in our new research strategy, which is evidenced around the building today. So too is excellence of research, and you've all been awarded excellence awards for your research essentially. So like drawing on your own experiences and your kind of practices around your own research and your own thoughts, what do you think, I suppose, are the kind of key ingredients for how a really positive research culture is developed? And Elaine, if I start with you, just kind of what things strike you when you hear about research culture, excellence, impact? Because sometimes people, when we talk about something is excellent, what exactly is excellent? How do you recognise it? How do you explain it? How do you role model it? So any thoughts that you have thinking about how maybe excellence and culture are connected? And I'll just move along to all of you. You get more time to think about it than Elaine.
So I suppose if I talk about my own experiences in the Department of Psychology and also as a member of the Centre for Social Issues Research, I think there's a really nice culture of support There, more so than competitiveness, I think that there's a really strong culture of supporting each other, and this idea of all ships rise with the tide, that if one person has success, then other people reap those rewards as well. But there's also a culture of listening to other people's points of views, getting together. So we would have research seminars on a weekly basis, but we also have a designated day every year where we get to talk about our research activities, how we can improve the systems and processes in our department to make things more efficient, to enable more time for research. But there's a strong culture of trust and support and mentorship, whether that's formal or informal mentorship, and I think that's been really, really crucial. As a part of the Centre for Social Issues, which is hosted in the department, we would have a weekly reading group where we obviously read articles, but we also read each other's manuscripts before submitting them for publication, or we practice if we were given a pitch to a grant or to a conference, we would do practice runs of that and get honest feedback from our peers, and I think that's been really crucial. So like for me, it's about people and supporting people who are new into our department or into the centre, because like for me, as somebody who worked in industry before coming into academia, it's a very complex place to work. There's a lot of complexity within the organisation, but also in the system that is academia. And I find that quite disarming. There was a lot to learn. It was a very steep learning curve. And I think the only way that it was made possible for me to kind of hit the ground running, at least in some domains of life and work, was through the support of other people, and other people being able to reach out a hand and say, would you like to come onto this project, or would you like to be involved in this? I think that was absolutely key in helping me to get started.
Great, and there's so much in what you're talking about, and we might pick up some of those later, like mentorship and advocacy and what exactly that is when you're in an academic role. But you're absolutely right about the complexity and navigating through it. And thank you for those wonderful examples that you've given us of what has helped you. And Hugh, does some of that resonate with you, thinking about how you've come from maybe being a postdoc and going to a different institution, coming back? Any of what Elaine has said resonate with you, or can you pick up any of those elements, or anything else that you feel might be of relevance?
Yeah, so a lot of it did ring true. You mentioned the word competitiveness and competition. I think sometimes healthy competition can be useful. So it's important that we do benchmark ourselves against our colleagues, but to do it in a positive sense. So to say, right, this person got a grant recently, you're not going to sit in your office for a week and seethe about it. You're going to say, right, is that going to drive me on? Am I going to go after it? I mean, talk with them, learn from their understanding that they got from the process as well. I think, as soon as you stop learning, you're essentially dead in the game. Once you're comfortable in your position, you need to constantly be trying to push on, improve your own skill set, learn new things as you go along. I mean, for me, I honestly don't care who I learn from, in the sense of I can pick up things from teaching a second year undergrad class, or I can pick up something from a top of the line prof who's a Bernal chair. And honestly, I don't really discriminate. I can learn different things from different people and try and take as much into my own career as I move along.
That's really interesting, Hugh. And how are you on the spectrum of this kind of conversation we have sometimes about saying no and saying yes? Some people talk about, needing to say no and take the very individualistic approach, and you seem to be suggesting maybe the opposite: be opportunistic, be open. And I'm somebody who, when people ask me this question, when I look back at my career, I've always tended to kind of go, yeah, sure, I might learn something, and I have, and I've learned an incredible amount of things by just taking the leap. Is that what I'm picking up, listening to you, Hugh, about how you've kind of taken those opportunities, benchmarked them as to what you want to get from them, but can you pull that one a little bit further from me?
Yes, exactly. So I think in leaning towards yes or no as your default position, I would say it should always be a yes if you're going to learn from it, if you're going to contribute to it. I mean, if I thought, hopefully I won't eat my own words, but if I thought that I could contribute nothing to the panel today, I wouldn't sit on the panel. And for myself, the reason I'm here, hopefully, is to learn new things, to get perspective from the other people as well, and I would kind of carry that throughout. If I think it's a menial task and I'm just a body in the room and not contributing, what's the point in being there?
And Hugh, I mentioned earlier deliberately about when I'd met you online and you were doing those other pieces. How do you manage the busyness piece? And maybe, Elaine, you want to pick up a little bit in this, and I'll get your perspectives, because you're further along that journey. So how do you manage? Because that's often a real struggle for people. How do you manage the saying yes, the taking on, the new opportunities, but yet all else that's there?
Yeah, and it can be tough. I mean, in the sense that we've two small kids and there's lots of juggling, and I think, you know, the whole COVID situation has put the whole flexibility around working into perspective, but just to prioritize the things that have value. Again, so, you know, if you have a list of 1 to 10 are your things that you need to achieve in a week, do them from ranking most important to least important. Some of the things will just fade into the background. It could be that, you know, you prioritize the most important things and then you realize I didn't need to do the more trivial things anyway.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I'll come back to you, Elaine, in a second, but I think it is wonderful that we can now sit here and talk about the fact that you have 2 young children. And I know other people have other things in their lives, children, you know, parents. And I think what I found really interesting from COVID is we got a window into other people's lives that we hadn't had before. You know, I can honestly now admit a day when I remember hiding the fact that one of my children was ill, because there was no space for me to ever talk about having children, let alone one of them was ill, and trying to manage a scenario where my childminder was ill, because that's why it was my child wasn't ill, my childminder was ill, and I had to figure out how to mind the child. So, you know, I really found that COVID has allowed us the opportunity to talk about the fact that we have dogs that need to be let out, the postman needs to deliver something. I was on a call last week and someone needed their car picked up because it had broken down. I think that it's been really fabulous from the point of view of flexibility and how we manage all that we do to help with some of that busyness conversation, because that's part of it. You know, we can't have the conversation about being an academic and being busy without wondering about how we do all the other bits in that. And I see others nodding at me as well. So thanks for that, Hugh. I think it's really important that we can have those sorts of conversations about it. Anyone else, any kind of things you're nodding? Anything else you're thinking about how we manage the culture, the support, the busyness, all those pieces? We're deviating a little bit, but that's probably no harm.
I think probably for me, you're talking about saying yes to things. It probably depends a little bit on the stage of your career as well, where you're at. But I think when you're saying yes to things, you have to be willing for the things to fail. And they do go wrong, right? But I think the important thing is figuring out how to take something positive from that yourself and take some learning from that. Like, you are going to make mistakes. That's just what happens. And there's going to be people who you click with in terms of collaborations and people you don't. And that's okay. But try not to get too down about those things and maybe stop you from taking a leap later on. I would be a classic run the other direction from certain things, to be honest about it. And I have had to be kicked to take on things. But that's been a learning for me as well, and kind of jump with 2 feet in and look, if it goes right, it goes right. If it doesn't, that's okay too. Yeah. But the busyness, again, I suppose, I guess from my point in the career, and maybe James, you'll jump in here, but I do think there's an onus on more senior members of our community to take on a lot of that burden, you know, and I do see that as part of my own role. Maybe others would think differently, but I do feel that as senior people and senior academics, we should be protecting our early career researchers and maybe doing some of that heavy lifting to alleviate that load a little bit.
I do agree. I know you're going to jump in, James, but you're not the only person I've heard say that. And I think that's increasingly part of the culture piece and the conversation about building that supportive environment. How do you allow people to, you know, do the things they need to do in a way that, you know, everyone shares? Because it's a long-term game ultimately as well. James, do you want to jump in there?
It is a long-term game, and I'll start off by contradicting Norma and saying she's definitely not the person who runs from every opportunity. Quite the opposite. It's as head of department, I usually have to sit down and go, "Are you sure now?" But culture is about it's set from the top in one sense, and it's bottom up in another. So you need really good people who are really eager, really competitive, really enthusiastic, and you need the culture set from the top to reflect that and to allow it to grow and to flourish with perhaps guidance as needed, but trying not to be restrictive at the same time. So it's a very tricky thing to get right, I think. But I know we've been fortunate in our department, I think, with the culture that's there and that has grown over the years. It's not anything that we can take credit for here, but we've benefited from it ourselves and feel the onus to try and pass that on then to people as we grow more senior. In terms of busyness, I mean, yeah, it's absolutely true. I'm glad it's opened up the space for people to reflect on where they are in their lives and to be more flexible in their working. I guess that was always a part of my own work ethic over the years, was to work flexibly and from home upon occasion as needed for research wise. I embarrass my colleagues by claiming that I never actually do any research in the office. Anything I've ever done it tends to be whiteboarded at home at crazy times, but as long as there's flexibility in the times that you can do that, then that's okay too.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, none of us, I think, could do these jobs without the flexibility. You know, as soon as you start to clock watch with me, you get nothing from me. So, yeah, I've always, I suppose, embraced that opportunity. James, can I tease you out a little bit more about MACSI and what has been kind of the secret sauce to the successful collaboration? Have you a sense? Can you unpick that a little bit for me? What are the ingredients?
So MACSI's been around a long time. You said 2006. I'd forgotten. It really is that long. I'd say the secret sauce is cultural in the sense that it was set up and worked well in a way. In the early days, its USP was the application of mathematics to real world problems, and that was rather unique back in the day before the research centres, etc., started up. Over time, that developed to becoming more in the space of statistics and mathematics, so both. Mathematics have been originally seen as applied mathematics. Working with industry, always a focus on excellence. I suppose that's kind of crucial, that we do work that's applied in the real world, and our mathematics and statistics is motivated by it, but we do it because we are at heart mathematicians and statisticians, and we want to publish papers in those domains. In mathematics in particular, I would say the papers can be slow to come. They take a long time to develop. You prove a theorem or you come up with a result. It can take many years to get it published, but it lasts forever. So it's our impact, the way impact works is a little differently. So we need people to realize that, to adapt to it, and to be open to collaboration. I think collaboration is at root really of everything that we do, and it's a cultural aspect to the way MACSI works, for sure.
And Elaine talked about the Centre for Social Issues, and is it similar, I'd imagine, MACSI, that supportive environment? So if I'm a new member of your department, I'm already, when I start, in situation environment, that there's that support for me presenting, there's somebody peer reading my paper. They're kind of the bread and butter things of a centre or a department. Is that kind of the type of pieces that
I guess we
on the ground stuff?
We'd all spend a lot of time working with. I think the department put in 5 Frontiers of Future awards last week, and it's a relatively small group, but we do have the MACSI Business Development Research Manager. Inez has been crucial to the successes, and Sinead Burke before her really drove the CRT application, for example. But with someone there to help organise, it's then a question of everyone buying into that and helping each other out, because that's just the way it's done. That is, as you said, the culture. So that's the way we work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think very valuable learning for us as an institution. I suppose how we can replicate some elements of that. And you will note, Cathal, I hope I'm not, is Cathal Annan still here? I can't see if he's there. I hope I'm not stealing your thunder now, Cathal, but we will be announcing a call for new centres later in the year. Cathal will be heading it up. So just might be food for thought for people in the audience or online who are thinking about, what are the really successful ingredients that help sustain and bring on a centre. It's not just a centre for a centre's sake. It's actually about building capacity and really excellent and impactful research. So thank you for that. James, can I ask you a little more of a kind of a personal question about your work with IMAG? I mean, it really is clear from what Philip has said, and he's repeatedly says it to me when I meet him about what James has done and your colleagues. But it's clear you've given a huge amount to IMAG in the country. I think that's genuine, is fair to say. What did you take from the experience? Beyond being extra busy, I'd imagine, for a very long period of time.
It was eye-opening in many ways. The original sort of call came in March 2020, where colleague Brendan Murphy in UCD rang me one weekend to say, look, there's a group being put together. Do you think it would be something you'd be interested in involved with? I said, yes, of course. Any of us who had any, I suppose, familiarity with disease modelling at that point had realised how serious the situation was. It was clear, and the data was already coming from Italy and so on to show that there was exponential growth of cases, wasn't slowing down or stopping in any real way. None of us, I think, at least of the mathematical and statistical modellers, had any idea what the modelling capacity within the Irish system already was in terms of the health system. So when we were asked to be on an advisory group, of course, we said, yes, that's certainly happy to come along and advise. It was a little bit of a shock to realise that it was going to be very hands-on advising, as opposed to, pointing to various different models and letting someone else off and get them done. But March 2020, everyone was doing whatever they could to help out. So there was no question of not doing anything that could be done. The models are not that hard, I would say. We teach those kinds of models to first, second year students.
Not that hard now for people who are very good maths. I mean, in our house, I don't do the maths homework. So James, please, I think you need to qualify that.
But a lot of the challenge was actually as I think Philip said in his piece, the challenge was not that the models themselves are difficult to run, or if you knew the parameters of the model, you set it going on a computer program pretty fast. The problem was that the data was coming slowly, was noisy, was volatile. There was a lot of uncertainty around many different things. So incorporating all that in some sensible and defendable and then communicable way were the three challenges. And that, again, really wasn't just me. It was I drove a lot of the mathematical modelling part, but the work with the statisticians in the group, both in MACSI and Brendan Murphy in UCD and externally, was really crucial to it. So I learned a lot about just dealing with uncertainty in lots of different contexts, quantitative and otherwise, and the value again of collaboration. Something we're very familiar with, I suppose, in the MACSI group, because we've over the years built study groups with industry. We've done those both in UL and in UCD with our friends and colleagues there. So we're used to sitting down for a week, brainstorming problems usually brought by industry, trying solutions, failing fast, all the things that you need to do when you're faced with a real world problem in a short time frame.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, James. Elaine, you had an opportunity as part of your work on COVID-19, the COVID-19 Heroes, to present to the UK twice. You presented to the UK All-Party Parliamentary Group on coronavirus, talking about mental health of frontline workers. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience of that, your COVID-19 type related work?
So it was terrifying. It definitely was a very daunting experience. So I did that with my colleague, Dr. Rachel Sumner, who's actually here today. She's sitting in the audience. She happens to be visiting. So we had been working on the COVID-19 Heroes project since March 2020, the start of the pandemic. So we had gathered qualitative and quantitative data. So we were really keen to get it in the hands of parliamentarians who could hopefully actually do something useful with the data and intervene in what was unfolding, which was a very nasty picture of the psychological welfare of these frontline workers across all sectors, not just healthcare. So obviously it was a daunting experience, but we were well prepared. You know, we did our homework, and we obviously didn't do too bad of a job. We were invited back a second time, and it was a really important, I suppose it gave our project publicity, and in terms of influence, I suppose it was part of the puzzle in influencing what has now become a public COVID inquiry into governmental decisions that would have happened during the pandemic in the UK. And it was particularly interesting to have the context. So we had collected data both in the UK and Ireland. So we were able to offer country comparisons, based on the data that we had. And I think that was really powerful. And having also, I suppose from our perspective, we really wanted to give our participants a voice. We felt that they were just kind of being forgotten about in the thick of the pandemic. So having both the quantitative data but also the qualitative, the comments coming directly from those participants and those frontline workers was really, really powerful in influencing, that very human story of what was happening on the ground for those people, rather than, data is obviously really powerful, but to back that up with some of the qualitative comments, I think was really powerful and quite influential.
Yeah, well done, Elaine. You're absolutely right, the importance of the multiple discipline approach, or the very discipline and varied methodology is so important for all research, but particularly an example like COVID-19 and the future mission and challenge type research that we'll meet in the future. So thank you for that, and well done.
There, actually, Norelee, I think from us as well, we learned a lot about that communication piece, that it's one thing communicating your results in a way that's understandable to people, but it's a completely different kettle of fish to communicate your results in a way that creates action and either changes behaviour or changes policy or whatever that might be, and I think we've all learned a lot from that process on maybe what not to do as well as what to do in that scenario.
Yeah, that's absolutely very true. Thanks, Norma. Hugh, can I just chat to you about something different to that now? Just a little bit about, I suppose, funding. And, it's fair to say that you've a very impressive funding track record with your Surge Award and your involvement in EU funding. And how important has this been for you? I mean, obviously quite important, I would imagine. But I suppose more about the particular factors that helped your success. It's very easy for me to read out a few lines that talk about your success, but there's so much underneath that. And what do you think are the successes, or the elements that lead to success? And maybe there's failure pieces as well you want to speak to.
Yeah, sure, and there is, and what I would say, I can talk you maybe through the timeline of it, in that I came back to UL in 2016, as you pointed out, and basically it was, how do I phrase this diplomatically, it was a case of, make it in the next couple of years or move on. I had been a postdoc for 4 years in UCC, and I didn't want to be the perpetual postdoc. You reach your shelf life at a given time, you're either going to make it, and get a full-time position or not. So with the Horizon 2020 funding we went after, which ultimately turned into SciDrive, the process there was, it was a 2-stage European proposal. So I was given the opportunity to work on that basically full-time in 2018. Basically learned how the whole process worked in the first stage. We were second ranked from that, and was able to refine it then in the second stage, and we were first after that. And it was back to the competition piece. So, you know, I knew that they would fund 3, so technically we just needed to be in the top 3 to get funded. But once that word came back that we were second, that was like a rag to a bull, a red rag to a bull. I had to be first in that competition. And I mean, it would have been very unusual for us to be going after that funding in the first place. You know, we're an island on the west of Europe. A lot of those framework proposals are coordinated from Germany, Italy, Spain. So we kind of had to put our necks out there, and we had to really go for it and build connections. So again, Cathal might get a second shout out here. So we went to Brussels as part of the application building process, and for me it was kind of that experience that I had there, where I was the person who was on the ground writing the proposal, and I had to go into this room full of academics from all of these leading institutes and basically lead the discussion on how we were going to refine the proposal, how were we going to do this. And it was just the kind of the support and the realization of, hang on a second, we can actually do this. We can compete at the European level, but we do need to learn how to play the game. So we need to learn how to, you know, and across the board, we were very used to going into the lab and doing our experiments, but it's the other aspects. It's communicating the impact side of things, all of the different aspects that go into the European proposals as well. And to be honest, from there, and it might sound easy, like that first piece was just a tick box, but everything just kind of fell into place from that. So the surge that you mentioned was pretty much directly after that. So I went from having to do a 70-page full proposal of an EU proposal to, I can't remember, an 8-page surge. And I honestly would have done it in my sleep at that stage. But it was just learning the process, learning how to get that across on paper, that kind of was fundamental there.
Yeah, no, really important lessons in that, isn't there, Hugh? Listening to you, there's the craftsmanship of writing, but there's also the wider piece, the networking, the communication, the collaborating, the putting yourself out there, the not being afraid to, the backing yourself, the realisation that you're good enough to be able to go out and, you know, succeed at that level. I think that's important, and I know lots of colleagues have had that experience travelling, you know, to Brussels leading grants, but also putting yourself out there. I think something, you can get comfortable as an academic, you can get to the point you think that this is the day job and there's a routine, but that element of pushing yourself, it sounds like that's been very valuable for you, and something I suspect you would tell people to keep doing and not to be afraid to do, or to restart if you have stopped, or to do it if you haven't started it before.
Definitely. And as Norma said, you can't be afraid to fail. You will fail. I have had more unsuccessful applications than successful ones. Yeah. And sometimes you'll have a hot streak, sometimes you'll feel like giving it all up, but you know, you need to keep going. Every application that you don't submit is one that you don't get. Even recently on the SFI Frontiers program, I put in a submission, as some of your colleagues did. I hadn't intended to, and then I met someone at an event and they said, I'm going to put something in for that, and I went, I should put something in, and I did. And you know, probably won't get funded, but it might.
But look, you have something that's well baked, so to speak, for another round, and that's often the thing. I remember early in my career listening to somebody talking about having proposals in the top drawer, and the ones that get rejected, you know, put them away for a while, lick your wounds, come back, pull them back out, but don't ever not use them again. And they're important learnings for all of us. I'm very conscious of time. I'm going to pause for a minute. Is there anything particular anybody else in the audience wants to ask at this point that's jumping out at people? Because I have loads more questions, and I could sit here for the whole afternoon, which I'm not allowed to do. So anything else at this stage you want to check in on? Yeah, Katrina, work away.
Just around that whole topic of valorising your research, and if you had a postdoc in your area and they wanted to make that first step for the outside world, for that engagement, whether it's for business engagement or societal engagement. You were touching on those tips there, putting yourself out, not giving up. What other tips would you give to a researcher to make those connections? Now, I know MACSI are very good at the external collaboration, but if you were to talk to your own person, what would your top 3 tips be? I'd love to hear that from each of you. Thank you.
pressure. I would say practice. It would be the first one. So if you go out and you just have one pitch to make and it's your be-all and end-all, and if you fail, you're screwed. That's not the way to operate. You have to practice. You have to refine your approach. I mean, for us, it's something I've learned over time as well, is the way we communicate our research is so different for different audiences. So I did the Research Impact podcast, and I needed to do it for a completely general audience. Whereas if I gave the same speech to a company, they might say, this guy hasn't a clue what he's talking about because it's so general. So, really pitching the idea to the correct audience, getting to know who you're speaking to in advance. So if you go in with the cold call to an industry and you can't give them genuine value as to what you can add, they're not going to be interested. And I think that does take time to build those links. So I'm not sure how many that is, maybe two. Is that 2? Yeah, we'll count it as 3, 2.5.
We were the same in MACSI really when we started. It was a little bit of cold calling people and I guess getting some small wins and building that reputation by delivering what you say you're going to deliver. We're quite good in MACSI at not over-promising and under-delivering and making sure that we'll do what we say we do, or at least if we can't do what we said we'd do, we can explain why. And that's really important, I think, for building trust and engagement with people and building those relationships long-term. I suppose within MACSI, like with people who want to get involved with industry, you can be brought on to some of the projects with other people and you can learn from that experience, or we can go out with the business development manager doing a pitch to a company, for example, and learn from that experience, and we're building a real pool of talent there now who you could send out to any industry partner and they'll be well able to pitch what we do, what we don't do, and go from there, I suppose.
It's the ability to link into existing networks though is crucial as well, right? So we've built networks over the years, and we're at more senior levels always happy to bring people out and get them involved in those conversations. Even events like this are important. You get to meet people, to network, to get to know people. I think it's fair to say that mathematicians and maybe less so the statisticians, but we're not natural networkers. We the one about the mathematician who's the outgoing mathematician who's the one who looks at your shoes instead of at his own when he's talking. It's we're not the most socially active for the most part, but so that really does involve a push, and it does involve us reminding our colleagues, yes, you really need to go make an effort. It's not natural for you. Helena runs a really good research impact module that our CRT students all take, and herself and Christina have really helped to crystallize that, I think, and help them to as you said, to express what they have to say, to communicate it in a way that's suitable for the audience, and also to appreciate the value of networking and getting to know people and meet people. Yeah.
James, I think you've definitely cracked the not looking at each other's shoes or anyone's shoes in MACSI. Certainly wouldn't have ever got that antisocial vibe ever from you as a group. That's really interesting, because I think sometimes it's nice to get under the hood of what exactly is at the kernel of some of this engagement. Because I remember being a younger academic, younger, and being terrified at having to go, I was very comfortable in a clinical hospital environment. When you go beyond that, it's a little bit like, will you be credible? How will you not appear like a fool, as Hugh has said? But it's that little bit about being strategic and thinking about who you're speaking to and communicating well, but being able to tailor, and the supports that are available from groups like Helena. And Helena, do you want to pop in there now?
Yeah, thanks very much. Great presentations and congratulations again. I have a very practical question to ask, and that is, one of the themes that's come across today is the busyness. And I just wonder, are you research bingers or snackers? And what I mean by that is, do you, maybe teach in the afternoon, because this is the reality for a lot of us, maybe teach in the afternoon, do a bit of research in the morning, a bit of snacking, or do you wait for days off, teaching free days to research? It's something a very busy lecturer below the bar asked me the other day, and that's why it's really clear in my mind.
Well, I think the evidence would suggest that the people who do it on a daily basis are probably more productive and it's more sustainable over time. So I think when I've been the most productive, it's been when I've been doing kind of 2 hours every day and building it in. For me, I'm a morning person, building it in at the start of the day, prioritizing that and then working the schedule around that. But I mean, life sometimes gets in the way of that, and then I'm happy to binge, ideally with a glass of wine. In the evening, but a bit of both. Yeah.
Thanks, Elaine. Very interesting.
I would say both as well, and thanks for vindicating my kind of primary method. I would say keep, throughout the week is the way I try and do it. And like I said, what I've recently discovered is teams have a task list where I can put down what I actually need to do. These are my 5 most important things to do. Get them done, tick them off, and it's a huge sense of satisfaction when you do that. I mean, some of the bigger proposal things do take the binge approach. You have to sit down and put, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours uninterrupted focus on it. But by the same token, you can just get lost in the fog as well. That if it's something that requires really focused work, I would say in bite-sized chunks. So I'm going to finish this impact section now, walk away from it, and then check it in 2 days when I've settled back into it again. Be maybe my way.
Fantastic, thank you. Norma.
I'm probably a binger at times, but I've quite a large team of researchers, so I suppose a lot of my time is spent supporting them and helping them with their ideas. Like a lot of that research is done through early career researchers and postdocs and PhD students at the moment. But again, I suppose I have 2 small kids, so I get my research done when they're in bed sometimes, which for work-life balance maybe isn't an ideal message to be giving people because there is no off. But sometimes that just has to be the way it's done, and that's just it. Yeah.
Sometimes if it's a good enough idea, it just won't wait, right? Sometimes you just have to get to a whiteboard and work it. I can't afford to let things wait. So if I was waiting until I had time to do something, I'd never get it done. So it has to be tailored in to some extent. I try and block some hours each week. Definitely no email, definitely no phone even. It's the only way to try and get some uninterrupted time, and that at least keeps things ticking over. And like Norma, big teams as well. So there's a certain amount of meeting with people every week, which there's nothing like having a PhD student needing some feedback to really drive you into it, which is good.
Thanks for that, folks. I think the clear message from all of you is be active on a regular basis. There's no waiting for the ideal time to do your research. And I think that's the biggest mistake people make, waiting for a time when they have more time to do it. So keeping something going all the time is important. There's 2 more questions. James, did you have one at the back? Yeah. Hang on, do you want to wait for a microphone? Sorry. And I know there's another question over here, and I'm really conscious of time. We're supposed to crack on.
So thank you very much for that. I suppose a comment from my end, given that I work with James and Norma, and I've had a few discussions with Hugh, I wouldn't say many, is that they're all highly organised people. So stuff gets done on time, and typically I was talking to Hugh about his Frontiers to the Future application, and he submitted it a week early. So I think that's correct. Yeah.
My God, American.
Yeah. So, but I suppose from my end, and obviously our profession straddles many things, teaching, research, administration. But from a research perspective, within each of your fields, what do you think you would need, or if the college just came to you and said, what do you need to reach the next tier of research excellence, what would you ask for? Would you ask for a doubling of faculty, a doubling of lab space, whatever it is? I'd just be interested in your thoughts.
Start with you, James. Because we've had some of these conversations, but
we have, yeah,
or having them, I should say, more than had. Yeah.
The team, of course, is crucial. We keep mentioning it. So people is vital, and people need space. So all of the above. But again, I keep coming back to the business development research manager, someone whose job it is to help coordinate, to take a step back from the day-to-days that academics have, and say, look, we need to get your priority list a little bit reordered here, as you said, and maybe Hugh's so good at that he doesn't need someone like that. But in general, having someone to say to us, look, this needs to go up the priority list is really, really important. So that's for me.
I'd agree with you. I think having someone there that's always here, you should be putting your name in for this application. Like, I would never have applied for Frontiers of the Future, only Sinead Burke literally sat on me and was like, you're doing this. So that's been really, really important for us within MACSI. I think having that person external, or to the academic life, just saying you need to prioritise this and go do it, basically.
I would just say good postdocs are really crucial. They kind of are the glue that ties the whole thing together, in that they have a bit more bandwidth on the research side without having the academic pressure on top. If I had to look back, I think the time I had as postdoc was probably some of my most, how do I even describe it, was some of my most engaged. I was really clued in. I knew exactly what I had to do, and I could just focus on that. I think they were really, really useful.
I think they're really good points so far. I think from the early career side of things, to be able to enable early career academics to have funding to get their first PhD student in the door would be great, because I think there's often a time lag by the time you identify the right person and you go for funding. So maybe to give some funding support for those initial year or two, just to kind of get people in the door and get that relationship started, I would say.
Thanks, Elaine. And I think from listening to you, there's not a one-size-fits-all. It's got about bespoke, and it's about different targeted for different disciplines, different stages, and different cohorts. Thank you for that. Have we time for one final question? Yeah. Was there somebody up the back? Barry.
Sure, I'll keep it very quick, and thanks a million for the presentations. Just in general, universities in general and kind of researchers in particular are asked to justify their existence an awful lot, especially in the real world. We kind of heard it differentiated earlier, the real world and the academic world. Do you find it easy to anticipate and articulate the potential impact of your research at the outset? Are you ever surprised at the impact that your research has at the other end, or is it something that you can easily anticipate? I guess I'm asking in the context of early career researchers who might be preparing grant applications and are asked very particular things about what you anticipate the impact of your research to be. Is that something that gets easier, or is it something that you're always surprised by?
Interesting question.
It continues to surprise, but less so in the sense that I've written some impact statements over time and had to hold my nose going, that can never possibly be true. And yet some of it does happen. So the impacts, a lot of it's about potential and about what could happen in the future, and the future's a long time. So there are some things that take a while to reach reality. I wrote some of my early disease spreading papers 15 years ago. And in the impact statement you mentioned global pandemics, blah, 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 blah. I never really thought that would be an application, but there you go. Sometimes it happens.
I guess I'm in the area of statistics, so because we kind of have our fingers in a lot of different areas, it's maybe a little bit easier at times to be able to demonstrate impact from a societal perspective and from an economic perspective. I don't know if, well, maybe it does surprise me. I'm not sure. What surprises me sometimes is that, you know, some of the simplest things that we do are often the most impactful things. So I can draw a picture of someone's data and their mind is blown by it, and I'm like, but look at my lovely model here. This is, look. But it's the picture that's the really important part. So I guess it's not necessarily that it's surprising we have impact, it's maybe where that impact is and how that's delivered is maybe a bit more surprising at times.
For me, it's pitching the level of the impact or how you would communicate it is important. So for us, we work in battery materials. I mean, it's a multi-billion euro industry. I think most people would have an understanding of why battery research is important, but to have something that's believable. So if we say that we're going to directly open a gigafactory 5 miles down the road in 2 years' time based on the research, it's not believable. So it's having the kind of different strands to the impact, whether it's developing the skills, whether it's developing IP that we can license, you know, stuff that is believable and achievable is kind of the important thing for us.
For me, I suppose I feel still very new to this game. So for me, I suppose with the projects that we have ongoing, it's starting with the why and what it is we're trying to achieve and what we would like to achieve that's useful, and having some idea of the potential impact. But I suppose it's still surprising because it's so new to us. So it's a work in progress, I would say.
Great. Listen, thank you all very much. I'm very conscious of time. It's been really interesting, and unfortunately we don't have more time because I think there's so much more we could unpack. But maybe through Emerge Network or others with MACSI, we can have more of these. But I think what we've learned this afternoon, or really kind of reaffirmed for us, I think for me particularly, is the importance of the culture, the support, the environment, the good colleagues, the give and take, the ebb and flow, the flexibility, the managing it in whatever way works best, but also recognising that there's a long-term aspect to it. And as you move through your career, your engagement with different parts of it evolves, and what you take on, what you give up. And that's the lifetime part. And that's, I suppose, the beauty of academia. And that's what's so enjoyable about it. So it's been a pleasure talking to you all. Congratulations again on your well-deserved accolades. I mean, absolutely recognise what we could all see here today and what we know about your work. And thank you very much. And thank you as an audience. And before I finish, I would like, because I'm not sure I'm going to get the opportunity again, but to thank the colleagues in the Office of the Vice President of Research for organising organising this wonderful Research Week. They are an absolutely phenomenal team to work with. I am happy and privileged every day, genuinely in this role, to have such a high calibre team to work with. And, you know, I don't say that. People who know me know I speak straight. So that is very heartfelt in what I say. And it is just wonderful to have the opportunity to work with you. Thank you all very much. You've done a great job, as usual. And thank you, panel. Been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you also to Norelee, who chaired a fantastic launch event for Research Week 2023. Just to let you know that there are other events taking place this afternoon. If this has whetted your appetite, here at 3 o'clock, it's the Academic Research and Industry Collaboration. So we'll have a panel of academia and industry talking about this important work that takes place. At 3:30, we've got the using participatory and arts-based methods in migrant health research, which obviously is becoming a much bigger focus now because of our society and everything that's happening there. And also at 4 o'clock online, it's the HEA-Net research collaboration that's taking place there. So I'd like to reiterate thank you to Norelee, to James, to Norma, to Hugh and to Elaine for a fantastic opening to this year's Research Week UL 2023. Thank you very much.